Good afternoon, everybody, and a particular welcome to Peter, Marian, and Dean for this first session. I just wanted to really, during this first session, for each of you with different businesses, different business models, but all been experiencing changes and challenges for yourselves during the pandemic. Obviously, the number of stages as we move out. So I just wanted to come and talk through that and issues you have and hopes for the future. But if I can come to you first, Marian. So Marian, you're part of the Staycity group, and we know here in Liverpool you have two great products, one on Duke Street and the other one in the commercial district.
Yeah.
Excuse me, just overlooking the fountains.
Yeah, they're an amazing group and growing stronger as well by the minute.
Yeah. Excellent. Pre-pandemic, your business model was very much, it was a mix of business and leisure, was it?
Yeah, so we had a complete mix of business and leisure. So midweek, it was always the business or the project work that was in the city. Then weekends, it was the families or the groups coming into the city for just a weekend away.
Yeah, so what did you have to do during the pandemic to keep a business afloat?
We swapped and changed on a monthly or weekly or sometimes daily basis. So we had to make the decision of whether to close or stay open. So we took the decision to stay open. Because there was a lot of key workers in the city. There was a lot of project work that was still going on in the city, and these guys still needed somewhere to stay. So we also took the decision to look at the different markets. So take, for instance, the students that unfortunately some of them couldn't get home because of the travel ban. So where did they have to stay? So we looked at the model in a different way, and we looked at the students that couldn't afford to probably stay in other accommodation. And we just revised the model a little bit and went out with student rates and looked at the residential for, again, people that were moving house and they were waiting to get the keys to their new house, that sometimes they were waiting a month or 2 months. And so we looked and just revised on a monthly basis. And we ended up having about 40% occupancy through just changing that little piece in our business by looking at the student and the residential market for the last 12 months. And it really worked. As I say, we could help them out, because I know I would panic if it was one of my daughters that was stuck in a foreign country through this and couldn't get home, could not manage to get home. We had one girl, her flight kept getting changed on a weekly basis. She thought she could go back home and then she couldn't. So we just worked with them on a monthly rolling contract rather than tying them into something long-term, because we never knew when things were going to change, because it was just also up in the air. So yeah, we re-looked at it and looked at that model, and then anyone that was doing project work in the city as well, and then obviously the key workers that had to stay out for work.
But you have to continue looking at it. You said you looked at it every month.
Yeah, every month. It was literally changing monthly. We had more calls. It brought our team stronger together, because we never really spoke as a team, as a UK, especially as a UK team, but as a wider team into Europe and everything. We never spoke that much, whereas now we speak weekly. So again, it's changed how we work as well and how we interact with the guys that we work with in all our other properties. And we had those calls weekly, in the beginning, 3 times a week, because everything was changing that fast, because you never knew what was going to happen. And even when the first lockdown finished, everyone thought, oh, happy days, we're out of this. Let's open back up and see what happens. And yeah, it was great for a couple of weeks, as we all know. And then all of a sudden the cases start to rise again. And we were just waiting to see, okay, who's going to go back into lockdown next? So again, that had to be changed back really quickly to say, okay, we need to stay on the line that we're on for now and wait and see what happens. It was just a waiting game to see what kept happening.
So how much of that change do you think you'll stay with it as you move forward? Do you think this is a permanent change of model?
No, I don't think so. I do think it's another arm to the business that we can now look at, and some of our properties will keep it for a little bit longer, and we will always be more flexible to it. As I say, it's a market we never looked at before. So it is a market we will stay open to. But we can see the leisure market already coming back. So the minute that announcement was made on that we could open up in May, okay, we've had another announcement since then, we actually saw our leisure bookings just hit through the roof. It was absolutely unbelievable. We weren't expecting it, if I'm honest, because we did think people would still be cautious. But cities like Liverpool, like York, like Edinburgh, they've done really well in the leisure market, and you can see that strong leisure demand come back again. And
are you seeing that booking now coming through into the rest of the summer?
Into the rest of the summer, right through. We're really strong. This month we had 10,000 guests come through our doors in May, which was just phenomenal. Considering most of the month was in lockdown. But again, we are adhering to the rules. It's all families. So the groups that come to stay with us are in their own little bubble. And Liverpool has so much to offer. That's the great thing. And that is what attracts them all to the city, is we have so much to offer in this city. We can see it July is really, really strong. And August is pacing ahead of what we were doing in 2019 at the moment, which is, again,
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
And where are your visitors coming from? Are they, obviously we know it's all domestic because there's no international.
Yeah, it's all domestic. So it's from all over, to be quite honest. It's from all over the country they're coming. We're seeing a lot of guests coming from coming up out of London to spend a few days in Liverpool. I was just saying before, we did a fan trip a couple of weeks ago. It was the first one that we bought into the UK with a company called ITO Tours. And they held one night with me from September and then into 2022. When these guests arrived in the city for our fam trip, they've now realized there's so much to do that they've changed all of their bookings from 1 night to 2 nights because they cannot get out to see everything they can see in Liverpool in 1 night. So that's really positive because that's stronger. That's coming in from September onwards and for all of 2022 as well. And the feedback we've had from Liverpool about Liverpool has just been amazing.
But moving forward, obviously you think it's coming back strong, but what are the impacts that pandemic's left on you as a business?
Wow. Well, of course, yeah. I don't know if we're still making money or not. I would have to go into our head office to see that. Yeah, as an industry, I don't think any of our businesses or any business in this industry or this sector will look at even breaking even for another couple of months. Hopefully we're coming near that stage. So it's all of, and like you have to be grateful for the support we've had. We've had the furlough, we've had the bounce back loans. So we're grateful for all of the support and the backing and the financial backing we've got. We're in quite a strong position now. But instead of now coming along and making money to put into our other properties, we now obviously have to look at ways of, you have to pay back those loans. They weren't just given to you, if that makes sense. So yeah, that impact has been massive. We were due to open 2 properties in Manchester this year. One will open. It will open in actually the 12th of July. It's going to open. But the other one, there's going to be a delay on that now by about a year. And it's not just us. It's all of, say, the construction work that has to go around it, because there's a lot of industries and sectors that are behind at the moment. So yeah, we should have been forging ahead and ready with loads of new openings. But they're still on the cards. They're still going to happen. They just aren't going to be next year. They'll be a couple of years down the line rather than next year, if that makes sense.
Right, good. All right, well, stay online and we'll come back and ask. There may be some specific questions for you. And don't forget, for our attendees today, that there is Q&A, there is also chat, so please do use that. Ask questions of our panelists. But if I can turn to Peter. Peter, well known at co-owner, with your wife Elaine of Lunya and Lunyalita at here in the Albert Dock and in Hanover Street. You've been very vocal and very supportive of the sector. We know back in the early days of the pandemic, you were on television quite a bit. So we know your business has been impacted a lot, but you've also transformed during the pandemic, haven't you? So I was reading, you're now the largest in the UK Spanish online of food and drink, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly by product range. I'm not too sure about turnover because no one discloses that really. But we've grown. I mean, the pandemic has helped our online trade last year grow by 3,000%. Wow. But, which is an astonishing amount. In fact, in January 2020, we were having a tentative discussion about whether or not we needed to abandon and close our delis and online because it just didn't seem to be working in the way that we wanted them to. And it became the reason why we're here, why we've survived. And it gave us a couple of important things. So it meant that we stayed open and traded right the way through the pandemic. If we hadn't, we would have gone under in April 2020. We wouldn't have survived. And, so the weak bit of the business has become our absolute strength. And we had the important thing for us was we had that platform before we went into the pandemic. So we had a big functioning website. We had a very, very big customer database of around about 50,000 people opt-in emails on that. So we had a means to communicate and to sell. And what we'd never realised before was that people like to hear from us. So we only used to send out a newsletter every 4 to 8 weeks. And then the first week of the pandemic, I was convinced we were going under. So I thought I'd best tell people this is likely to happen, because this is my mind. I don't want people to buy vouchers because we won't be here for them to use them. So I think I sent an email out saying that, said, look, if you do want to help, we've got this great website, by all means, we've got tons of stock, buy something from us. And it just exploded, and it never stopped. And I learned just to, every week I'd send an email out saying, look, well, this is what's happening this week. If you really want to help, we've got this fantastic cheese, but there's only 3 weeks left on it. And within 6 hours, 20 kilos of it would go. And I think that's one of the things that have really carried through, is that weekly communication from people who want to hear from us, and I guess just honestly telling her how it was. So there were weeks and weeks of saying, oh my God, things are awful. Even with all your help, we don't think we'll survive. Through to now, they're mostly celebratory ones, saying, my God, this is fantastic. Keep it up. Thank you so much. And what it's enabled us to do, I think, is we've always had a broad customer base well away from Liverpool region, but we have an enormous one now. So every week probably about 80% of our online parcels go right across the UK. Well, they used to go to Europe as well, but that's stopped since January. But so 80% go anywhere but the city region. And when we do online events, likewise again, probably 80% of the people who are on them are from everywhere, from Inverness to Bristol to Belfast. And it gives people, we've got that means both to communicate through email, through Zoom, as we do our events. We can get the products to people, and has given us this fantastic national customer base that works in all sorts of ways. So when people do visit the city, if they've ordered some manchego from us and they've liked it, they come and visit the restaurant, and vice versa. If they're visiting Liverpool or visiting us for the first time and then going back to Norfolk, well, when they want to get that particular wine or whatever, they come back to us to order it from. And we've had to really change and adapt. When we've taken on extra premises, quite a big extra space, because we need warehousing space for significant amounts of packaging and stock. The original plan was just to liquidate our stock, and then we were expecting the receivers to come in May. And by the middle of May, we were ordering pallets of new stock. It had all gone. We'd collapsed 3 sites stock into one from our old Manchester site and the 2, and we'd sold all that. And the great thing was we weren't planning to replace that. So that was just money into the bank to meet all of our liabilities. But then we started ordering, and the volumes we were getting through, and still today we get through, are so significantly more than any other point in our history. And that's carried through in the restaurant. This is our 3rd reopening since the July last year, December last year, and obviously May this year. And every time it's been astonishing. The only year we can compare it to at the moment is 2019, and each time we're just significantly up. We're both in the deli now and the restaurant, with people coming up. So we've gone from the depths of despair to things going really, really well, and we've probably never been in a better shape. And that's in the space of 16 months from we were insolvent by rights. Probably technically we should have notified someone, say, hey, we've gone, but we didn't. So we managed to trade out of it. Hoping for a great price when someone eventually buys us. That's quite a change.
Yeah, no, but obviously, it's an incredible transformation. And what was the spark that made you do that? Was it desperation?
Desperation and a determination not to go down without fighting, really. There was a sense of, we've got all this stock. I know when I opened Lunya, I always thought that, and I always had a vision of what success would look like, and what would it look like if we failed and we had bailiffs at the door. And And it's what would it look like if we had bailiffs at the door, which I've carried through with me all 11 years of Lunya. And one of those things was they weren't going to get their hands on our most expensive bottle of wine, a £1,400 bottle of Pingus. So one of the very first things I did was, when we closed in March, I took that bottle home and hid it. I thought, they're not going to get it. And that drove me really, well, what else can we do? So we just, as I said, we planned to liquidate the stock and then pay off all of our suppliers.
Yeah.
And it was a determination not to let. I thought, well, if anyone should get it, it needs to be our local, because all of our suppliers are either small local companies or small Spanish companies. Mostly family-owned ones. So it was a determination really that shouldn't happen, and trying not to let everything go down the Swanee. And we've got a good, hard-working, resourceful staff team, and we had lots of ideas of things to try. And I think probably both a bit of good luck and that no one's that daft, that everything we tried worked. We had this incredible success of basically packaging together what we call deli treat packs, mixes of cheeses and meats and wines and nibbles and snacks. Well, they proved an enormous hit during the first lockdown because people wanted a little bit of happiness in their own home. So we were doing 400 or 500 of those a week in April and May, and we're still doing 100 or so of those a week, plus lots and lots of other things. So I think that it was that resourcefulness, trying things, tweaking things. Our Zoom events. My regret was we didn't try our Zoom events until July, I think, or June. That we didn't start them in April really. Because we get 200 people at those, and when we do an online wine tasting, we have 200 people. We have the winemaker from Spain zoomed in, and we've got all that product out. When we do a wine tasting in Lunyalita, we're capacity limited to 45 people, so it's actually a much better in terms of revenue event to do them online. In fact, and now we're combining them, so as soon as we can get back to doing them in the restaurant, we're just now investing in the kit to then also to be able to broadcast them as well. So it will be a combined live and Zoom based event. But I think that's what I mean. That's really why we're still here, just a willingness to give it a go. And then as time went on, we became more and more convinced that our strength would come from our momentum. So when we reopened, we could reopen with the hitting the ground running because we'd never stopped. We had a huge amount of our staff off furlough working throughout. So people weren't getting into that. Often talked about when people get into this sort of furlough lifestyle of not working, getting paid, and expenses are a bit lower. So it's I don't know if that's true or not. Comfortable lifestyle. I never really subscribed to that. But our staff were, we had lots of them working. We had people in teams, so nearly everyone got a chance to work through the lockdowns, and meant we started from a real position of strength then.
Right. I mean, your business focuses very much on Spanish food and drink, and we know that. But this year we left the European Union, and we hear tales of the difficulties that import and export is having. Has that impacted your business?
Yeah, hugely. Because one of the things we did post-referendum to mitigate against that huge drop in exchange rate. So, we went from January 2016, was it? I think with 146 to the pound. And the day after the referendum, it was 108 to the pound. Now, all of our costs obviously went up enormously. So we started to import direct to cut out brokers and sort of middlemen and so on, which meant we were buying straight from the farmer, the cheesemaker and whatever. But that then post-Brexit has made that really, really difficult because quite often now we're buying from people who are brilliant at, they're a husband and wife team who are making cheese and they're brilliant at it, but they've got no desire to cope with the paperwork they'd have to cope with to export. Yeah. So we've lost one of the world's best blue cheeses as a consequence because basically the cheesemaker said, well, sod it, you're the only person outside the UK that buys it, outside Spain who buys it. And the cost of doing it and the hassle, I can just sell a little bit more to the city down the road or whatever. We've had big shortages of product, For 2 months we couldn't import because we couldn't find an agent, a customs agent, to do that. But the real loss for us has been in 2016, 80% of our workforce was Spanish, and today it's less than 9%. And so we've suffered this huge drain. And that's not just Liverpool. That was happening in Manchester as well, of losing very experienced, talented hospitality professionals who I mean, this is a bit of a generalisation, but basically said, well, sod it, if they don't want me, if the country doesn't want me, I'm going back home. Accentuated then by COVID happening, and people thinking, well, this is the time to go, and not returning. That whether or not that will happen, people will return. The way the immigration rules at the moment, it's hard to see us having any Spanish waiters, because the salary threshold is way above the basic salary for a waiter even to pass the immigration tests.
It's difficult to see how we can do that, but clearly a great success story, Peter, out of those ashes of despair. And thanks for that great example for all. I could sit and talk to you all day, but we've got another panel members here. And if I can come to Dean. Dean, you run a completely different business. Yours is a social enterprise, isn't it? That's connecting museums, schools, and communities, but connecting together, focusing on the past and how that impacts life as we are now. Clearly, you run 2 venues, and venues were closed. You couldn't quickly transform your businesses. So how's it been for you during this last 18 months?
It's been an interesting journey, I think. So Western Approaches is probably the flagship site people will know of in Liverpool, and the February before lockdown, we took the site on in 2017 from almost dereliction through to really thrive, and that February become our record-breaking month. You might remember all the way back then the aircraft carrier came up the Mersey, and the streets were thronged with tourists and obviously people interested in that naval connection to the city. So we had this wonder of a month, and things were looking great for the summer, and within a month of that it all stopped. And I remember saying to the staff that not to panic, we've got reserves, and I'm sure it'll all be over by August. And I think at the time I thought, if you would think it was going to last 18 months, you think that's it, we're all gone, we're all there's no way we'd survive. But I think in a strange way, and we've been affected personally. As a company, we've lost a member of staff to COVID, and another member of staff lost their mother. But besides the obvious kind of negative impact, we've actually had a really, really positive kind of 12, 18 months. We took time to redevelop and refurbish at Western Approaches, which we just literally would never have been able to have done without the forced opportunity. So we restored the iconic map wall, the Atlantic plot, which we were thinking to try to get it done 1 month in December and close, and it took 4.5 months to do in the end. And there's no way we would have been able to plan for and mitigate for all the problems, but we now have an absolutely stunning restored building. We started a few online lessons, which literally the first lesson was one of our staff and another member of staff on a mobile phone, and it was live on Facebook, and they were watching the numbers go up, and I think that one call, it was going 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 people watching this one lesson around the world. And so those little tiny kind of things that we did ended up meaning that we've got, we went from a couple of thousand social media followers to I think 60, 70,000 across all platforms, and largely the audience that you'd dream of in a kind of heritage and tourism industry. It was from the demographics, it's basically mothers. It's mums of young kids who are I think 80% of our followers on Facebook fall into are something like female and between the age of 25 and 45, because it's an interesting stat to show who was organising the lessons at home. But they're the people we'd always want to reach. So we're not seeing the levels of footfall that we had prior to lockdown by any stretch. We don't foresee that being the case until maybe even next summer now. I think walking around 2 hours in a museum with a mask is not my cup of tea personally, and I wouldn't want to do that. So we don't see that as reaching those levels. But I think a measure of success for anyone is, are you still here? Have you survived? And if so, that's a massive pat on the back. And have you used the time where possible, kind of constructively? And I mean, I'm actually in Chester today, so we have with the greatest of ironies, we have a pandemic museum called Sick to Death. So it's a history of medicine museum which explores, kind of disease, plague, sickness, and we were meant to open this in late March 2020. So you couldn't get any more bittersweet than not being able to open your pandemic museum due to a pandemic. But it gave us another year, I suppose. I mean, we were able to manage overheads, and we've done a lot more in the building than we would have. And we opened it on 18th of May this year, and we've had queues around the block. We've had to kind of limit tickets. We've got a waiting list for schools, and we've actually not far off doubled our estimates of, pre-pandemic. We were, our estimates of visitor numbers for this new place, we've doubled since opening. So I think that's a mixture of the extra bit of time has given us or forced us into kind of those extra finishing touches and putting extra effort into it, but also I think people are chomping at the bit to get out with families, especially, and younger families. So Western Approaches hasn't quite hit the kind of pre-COVID levels yet, but Sick to Death here in Chester's is smashing it, and there's another venue in Chester we're opening hopefully by August. And again, we took that site over, which is Diva Roman Experience, which has been there 30 years in the city, and it's tired and needs a lot of refreshment, but go back to it. But it was doing well and making a lot of money so many years ago. But they decided to kind of call it a day because of COVID, because a lot of their income, a big chunk, was based on schools and getting school trips in. And so we were able to go in and make an offer to buy that place out, which we'd never have been able to do, or they wouldn't consider in a normal year, I think. And we will really turn that round. But so it swings and roundabouts, really. It's looking for, as Peter said, it's looking for opportunity where there is. In I'm sure there's a German word for kind of finding opportunity in terrible circumstance, but as I say, we're still here, and that's our main measure of success.
Because you've got exciting plans with Western Approaches over the next couple of years, because if anybody doesn't really appreciate, Western Approaches was the nerve centre, really, that allowed one of the greatest battles of the Second World War to be won, which was the Battle of the Atlantic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's. It was a completely secret, hidden bunker during the war, and I think the challenge we've always had when we took over the site is that it is quite anonymous. It's in the kind of business district, and it's not really on the kind of tourist trail. But it's up there. It's as important as Bletchley Park. It's as important as Churchill's war rooms in London, and it's sat under our feet in Liverpool. It's an absolute gem. And as I say, when we took it over, it was a gamble for us, really, because we took on the responsibility of maintaining 50,000 square feet of 1940s bunker and everything that goes alongside it. But you can't buy one of these. The city can't, another city, Manchester, can't invest and get themselves an attraction, a visitor experience like this. So it's our challenge again over the next few years is just making people a lot more aware of it. And it's funny because from an international perspective, so we get some very, very super VIPs, if you like, come through the doors, privately, which we don't say too much about, because they've come for almost like pilgrimages to these sites, and then you'll have people who work in exchange flags in the building above and go, oh, I didn't realize that was there. So that's slowly changing. I think if you'd asked what Western Approaches was or what it was about 10 years ago, you'd be very, very little people would. But I think it's we're getting it out there, and it is looking good. We've had a dip, if you like, in that kind of trajectory. But as I say, we're still going, and we're hopefully going to see that recovery.
Great, good. Thanks for that. Well, if I can hand across to Chris for the second panel, but if panelists stay on for questions in chat, but I can hand across to Chris now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Bill. I mean, I think every time we do these webinars, I never fail to be inspired and motivated by the businesses and the adaptation, the innovation, the creativity that they do to survive and create new ideas. It's brilliant. Yeah, really symbiotic of Liverpool, I think. So this delighted on this side of the panel to welcome Joss and Jenny, and I'm going to start with yourself, Joss, because you undertake a very important role as CEO of UK Inbound. You know, at the moment we're very much in the midst of a domestic market. We work very closely with you. We rely very heavily on the work you do at UK Inbound to entice the European international market to want to come to the UK, and then we try and do our bit in Liverpool to get them up to our neck of the woods. But you know, in terms of how you see things at the moment, and you know, I sit with you on the tier group. You know, we have a number of discussions. How do you see the situation at the moment, and particularly as we come towards what we hope is this kind of Independence Day of July the 19th?
Yeah, I think it's very, very, very difficult, Chris. I mean, even at the moment, you know, if you looked at a reopening possibly at the end of July, for a lot of the summer season, you know, particularly the groups market, unfortunately, with the lead-in times you've got there, that's going to be very, very challenging, particularly the seasonality element of groups. I think there are some options for what we call FITs, the independent travellers, not travelling in groups, who have a shorter lead-in time. But I think we've still got some real challenges even within that, Chris. I mean, the first of which is that our competitors are opening up on the 19th. So Ireland, France are opening up. They're also opening up with less restrictions than we've currently got at the moment. So if you've been doubly vaccinated as an American, you'll be able to travel to Europe or to Ireland. So a lot of people are already making their choice in terms of where they're going to be going this summer, and the UK may not be on that list. You've then got kind of technical logistical difficulties in terms of allowing people in, because you know, there's been a lot of talk around mutual recognition of vaccination certification, quite technical, but obviously we need to recognise that people have had the vaccine. That's easy to do on an EU-wide basis if that's what the government decides to do. But in America, there's no centralised kind of, you know, certification system. So I think we're still headed for a real challenge, and I think that the UK government will prioritise returning Brits than they will do inbound tourists into the UK. So I think this year is really challenging. It's doubly difficult because actually there's a lot of demand for the UK. If you talk to some of the major US travel agents consortia, they have people who want to travel to the UK. They want to travel. They've got what's called future travel credits on their books. So this was bookings for 2020, the 2020 that they've shifted into 2021. They need to use them up. They will use them, but the likelihood of them being able to use them for the UK within the time frame that we need is very, very challenging. So I think this year is very, very difficult. And will we see significant business this year? I'd love to say yes in Q3, Q4. I think realistically, we're looking to next year. The great thing is that there is still significant demand to travel to the UK. People want to come to the UK. And, you know, there'd been some talk around kind of, you know, whether the Brexit decision had affected, you know, people's perceptions, positive perceptions of the UK. I think, you know, in terms of Brexit or the management of the pandemic, you know, we've had pluses and minuses there. But the UK remains an enduringly attractive destination. We've seen that, you know, the 80% growth that Liverpool has seen over the past 10 years in terms of international visitation. People want to travel to the UK. And it's not just London that they want to travel to nowadays as well. So a lot of positives in there. But for this year, I think it's going to be really challenging. I would kind of add on to that, though, and it's fantastic to hear, you know, the focus that everyone's putting on domestic, because bloody hell, yeah, you've got to focus on domestic because the inbound isn't coming back in the very short term. But of course, that in itself has its challenges. The spend from a domestic overnighter is only a third of an international overnighter. So you're not necessarily getting the spend in the right places. And I think the real risk in terms of putting all of your eggs into a domestic basket for next year is that we will see a lot of Brits traveling overseas who feel almost, if you like, captive this year. And I think we will see a large exodus of Brits next year. So I think looking for the domestic market this year absolutely has to be key, but don't forget that international business in the longer term.
Yeah, I mean, that's a an interesting point, Joss, in terms of this, pent-up demand from UK to travel abroad being matched by a pent-up demand for people to come to our country. Is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But in terms of how you've seen in terms of the lessons learned from the pandemic and how UK government visit, how they will see the importance of this sector and the support to this sector. I mean, do you see signs of change there, of a recognition about this, great ecosystem that represents this sector, and really the need to get behind it and support it and drive it in going forward?
I think, like a curate saying, good in parts, really. I think there is a lack of understanding of tourism, and by tourism I mean the international, in my case, movement of people across borders to different destinations. And I think a lot of politicians confuse hospitality with tourism. Hospitality is absolutely critical to tourism, but it's not the whole thing. So they don't see the importance of, say, for example, the tour operators, the intermediaries who bring in 50% of all the inbound tourists into the UK come through a tour operator. But the tour operators have been excluded from many of the support mechanisms that the government has rolled out, such as the leisure and hospitality grants or the leisure and hospitality restart grants. And I think one of the issues that we got, there is certainly a lack of understanding. I think some positives there is travel and tourism working together with aviation. We had our day of action last week, which generated a lot of positive media coverage. So I think government is starting to look at that. But to be fair to the government, they're in a right old pickle. Government thinks very, very short term, and in a pandemic, government thinks even more short term. Short term, what's the solution? Is to get the domestic economy running, to get the domestic visitation running, and then we'll think about the inbound at a later date. And I kind of, when you're dealing with a massive public health emergency, you think, yeah, fair enough, okay, I get that. I think what we've got to do is, the UK, this particular government has huge ambitions around Britain's place in the world, post-Brexit trading nation, our competitive positioning within the world. And really, that's only possible with a fully functioning inbound and outbound travel and tourism economy. So I think there's a lot more work to do, but I do think, we are starting to see a lot more politicians asking a lot more questions about when we can restart, around the value of inbound. But I also think we've got a hell of a long way to go as well. We saw, a very interesting kind of difference between the UK Westminster government and the Holyrood Scottish government, where the Scottish government came up with support funds for international, recognising the value of intermediaries and the importance of inbound. Maybe that's tied up with Scotland's position in the world as well. But so we've had some real success with that, but we haven't had that level of success with the Westminster government, but we continue to try.
So, Josh, just to, we had the pleasure of you coming up to Liverpool recently on a leisure break, albeit not on business. Yeah, so it was great to have you here in the city for a couple of days. Yeah, but when you look at for our businesses here in Liverpool in terms of positioning themselves, looking at how they can effectively attract the international market, and as you said earlier, it's a really important component for us to grow. We want to grow that more because of that spend that you mentioned earlier, but also they stay longer. It's good for our brand. I mean, any messages for our stakeholders and how to get themselves ready to capitalize on that international market when it comes back?
Yeah, I mean, what you've got in Liverpool is absolutely right for today's modern, international, sophisticated traveller. They don't just want to do London. London is a global multicultural city. You don't get the authentic nature of what you get in Liverpool. I think the burgeoning food scene, and again, fantastic to hear from Peter around some of the food product that he's got rolling out. That's what international consumers want. They want an authentic experience. And I think Liverpool has that in spades. The perceptions of the UK globally are very much centred around London. So people almost think of London as Britain and Britain as London. And so what I would say is that there's a huge opportunity for businesses in Liverpool to be working with the tour operators, because it's the tour operators who drive that regional spread in the absence of that consumer awareness of what there is to do outside London. Consumers think London and maybe a little bit of Scotland, but they don't really understand what there is to do outside London. So I think what you're really pitching at is that second, third, fourth time visitor to the UK, and working with some of the tour operators who program the whole of the United Kingdom to try and get them out there. anything, the fact that you can jump on at Euston and 2 hours, 15 minutes later, you can pop out of Lime Street has to be something, even if it's just a question of making sure that people are aware how close Liverpool is, that's got to be a great thing. I think one of the challenges that we're going to get moving forward is on the back of this is a lot of, tourism is regulated by means, money and motivation. At the moment, consumer confidence on the money, I think we're likely to see even domestically a dip in that consumer confidence as furlough works its way through the system, and we may start to unfortunately see more redundancies. But a lot of people have saved up a lot of money, so it's making sure that tourism can get that money rather than it being spent on, for example, an electric vehicle. I mean, a lot of people for a lot of people around the world, a trip to the UK is a significant purchase. And so what we're doing is we're not just competing against other destinations, but we're competing against consumer products as well. There will, unfortunately, probably be a little bit of a kind of COVID inheritance windfall as well, that people have received money through inheritance that maybe they weren't expecting because of the high death tolls as well. So that might potentially be something of an opportunity. In terms of motivation, as I say, that demand is there, but also recognizing that we have challenges ahead in terms of the means. Is Liverpool and Manchester very important for you? Manchester Airport, are they going to have the airlift that they've historically had into the UK region? So I think we need to be trying to do everything that we can to try and get more airlift into the UK regions. We do have challenges ahead. The removal of ID cards as a form of cross-border identification at the end of September is going to also have a potentially a significant threat to some of the EU travellers that we get at the moment as well. So I think certainly working with DMCs and working with the tour operators has absolutely got to be part of the marketing mix, not all of the mix, but certainly considering that they can give you the access to international markets. It doesn't come free. There's obviously a commission to be built into that, but that way you can extend your reach into international markets and keep Liverpool at the top of people's wish list.
Great stuff, Josh. So if just before I come on to Jenny, if you, with your crystal ball out, in terms of us getting back to pre-COVID levels, what's your best estimate?
Okay, well, if you look at it, you'd see that, say, for example, Tourism Economics, which is part of Oxford Economics, that they produced a report that says that the spend doesn't come back to what it was in 2019 until 2025. The government recently released a tourism recovery plan. Their objective is to bring that forward 12 to 18 months early, so looking at the mid part of 2023. I think that it will probably, I had hoped in November, I'd hope we get going by Easter, Christmas. I thought maybe we'd get going a little bit after Easter. As I say, I'm less optimistic for the remainder of this year. So I think it might take a little bit longer than people had hoped, but I also think actually we can rebuild quicker than the predictions are saying as well, because we know that demand is there. If we can make ourselves competitive, make ourselves attractive, people will want to travel and we should get a bigger slice of that pie. But it is very, very, I think one of the things we've got to look at is the level of government support. If 50% of all the inbound tourists coming to the UK book through an operator, and in markets like China, that's more like 70, 80%. In Germany, it's even 70%. We need to have a functioning intermediary system here. And some of them are on the very brink of failure at the moment. So we need to push government to maybe for our sector, if you're involved in inbound tourism, we will be the last sector to recover. So maybe we need to look at extensions of furlough and maybe some further sector-specific support as well.
Great, and well, great to hear from Josh. Some really, very interesting insights there into how our businesses, but also, how we can, how the UK will recover in this space, and like you say, still a lot of work to do to get back to anywhere where we used to be. So thanks for that, Josh. Yeah. Now, Jenny, if I come to yourself, business tourism, in a similar vein to inbound tourism, really important to the Liverpool economy. The business events, we're used to those bringing huge delegate numbers to us, and the challenges we know that COVID is created to the business tourism and events calendar, and also to that supply chain that is fundamentally important to delivering that sector. In terms of the work you're doing on business tourism, I mean, what are the kind of learnings you're picking out of COVID? What are the initiatives you're kind of looking at now going forward, which will help us rebuild that market and help contribute towards us getting back to those pre-COVID levels?
Well, I think initially is looking at the initiatives that we are already running and pushing them forward, particularly around our ambassador programme. So our Club Liverpool ambassador programme, which is run in conjunction with ACC Liverpool, involves us working with local academics, medics, professionals across the city to bring their conferences to Liverpool. So quite often they are members of major associations, international or national, and actually their influence within those associations, we can work with them to bring those conferences to the city. And all of that work has been continuing throughout the pandemic. Quite often the bids that we're putting in to win international conferences in particular are for events in a few years' time. We're continuing to put those bids through. There's, the RFPs are still coming out to us. There's definitely a desire for those meetings to still continue to happen face-to-face in destinations around the world. And obviously we want to make sure that Liverpool is considered to be one of the choices within all of those. Recently in the last 2 weeks alone, we've been successful in securing 2 conferences through the Club Liverpool programme, which combined will bring in £1.5 million in economic impact to the city. And that's basically, because as you mentioned, it's the supply chain involved in a business event. It's not just the venue where it's held, but actually those delegates are spending money in restaurants like Lunya. They're staying in Staycity. They're going to visit our attractions like Western Approaches. And actually the overall spend, as Joss mentioned, that international overnight spend is hugely important because it's worth a lot more than just the domestic market. So we are definitely keeping on top of all of that initiative, that work that's already been done over the past 6 years of Club Liverpool, and driving that forward in terms of recruiting new ambassadors, working with our universities to basically get them to shine a light on the world-breaking research that they are doing at the moment. The conferences give them the opportunity to do that. It puts Liverpool on a world stage and puts them in a great position. In addition to that, we're looking at some new initiatives. We've got 2 in particular that we're focusing on at the moment. So one, which actually Peter alluded to in turning some of his cheese and wine tasting events into hybrid events. So this is a huge topic at the moment in the business events world. And, considering how and when will business events return back to normal in-person events only? Will they become virtual events, or will they start being a mixture of the 2? And what we've done really to keep Liverpool in the mind of organisers is we've started working with a group called the Hybrid Cities Alliance, which is a global alliance of cities across the world who are working together to help clients who are organising international conferences pull together a multi-hub event. So effectively, a conference could be happening in Liverpool with delegates from Europe, and the same conference would be also happening with a hub in Sydney or a hub in Asia at the same time. And that group, I think it's now just under 20 cities who are collaborating on that. They published a white paper this week around how to run multi-hub hybrid events. And Liverpool is the first UK city to be part of that group, which is really great for the UK. It's great for Liverpool, and it keeps us connected with those key markets as well. So, there could be an inquiry go to a city in Asia who are looking to have a hub in Europe. Due to travel restrictions, they can't have it all in one place, but they still want to have those hubs. And we're going to be working together with the Convention Bureau from those other cities to make that happen. So that's a great opportunity. And I think there's a lot of debate about hybrid events and, are they going to be too expensive? Are they going to work, in terms of managing time zones and all this kind of thing? And I think there's a lot of work going on within the Convention Bureau world to try and help our clients navigate all of this and support them. So that's an initiative that we're working on at the moment. We're also looking at sustainability. So this is one of the key. It's not a trend. I guess this is just the way things are going to be now. sustainability is just hugely important in the business events world. We're seeing it now with when the request for proposal comes through for a conference. This is what they're asking for. They're asking for information about what are you doing on a social level? What are you doing on an environmental level? Does it align with our own association's objectives? And what they're looking for, this isn't simply about, oh, well, we've got rid of all our plastic cups in our events venue. It goes much deeper than that. And actually, it's much more about the social value, the legacy that it brings to the city, as well as that environmental impact, which is hugely important, particularly around carbon offsetting, people flying to conferences and events. So we're just in the process of the early days of working with a group called the Global Destination Sustainability Movement. And they are going to be working with us to help audit where we are in terms of sustainability. So we've got 71 different pieces of evidence that we've got to go through, which is from a city level, so city council policy, to the destination marketing organisation and what we're doing, and out to all of the hotels and venues and what everybody is doing. And it will give a great picture of where we are as a destination in this sustainability journey. And I think sustainability is one of those things that everyone talks about, but not everyone does something about it. And this gives us an opportunity to really start taking some action in growing what our sustainability offer is for the future. So that's an initiative that is going to be really important. And I think it's something that all of our venues, the whole supply chain, the restaurants, the hotels, all need to start really thinking about what is your social value, what is your environmental impact, and how are you going to measure it? How are you going to look at improving things in the future? So I think that's certainly something that's going to be very important.
Yeah, and I think across two really I think important areas there for us. I mean, I think we've noticed this now. I think on everything, on sport, on everything, that the social impact positioning is now becoming as important as the economic, and we have to find the balance between the two models. And it's good that we're starting to look at that now and get us ahead of that, so that when bids come through, we're well prepared for that. And I think the whole thing around hybrid is going to be fascinating, in terms of how that plays out, particularly from a cost perspective. And great stuff on the Club Liverpool programme. I think that's going from strength to strength. And I think as our universities, particularly around health and life sciences, continue to grow and develop, I think the conferences that come off the back of that will continue to develop. So Josh, Jenny, thanks very much for those really valuable insights around inbound tourism and business tourism too. As I said, really important drivers for business here in the city. So Bill, I'll hand you back to pick up anything on the Q&A and to wrap us up for the day.
Okay, thanks for that, and thank you for that second panel. Chris, if I can come back to you, actually, there's one question on the Q&A, and I know it's been very topical recently, around about Liverpool's status as World Heritage, and the potential loss of that status. Do you believe that will have an impact on tourism? And what's the current situation? Because I'm hearing that potentially we're not going to lose it as we thought. It's not imminent.
Well, I think we've been on the naughty step around World Heritage status for a number of years now, and obviously as we've began to expand the development, particularly of the Liverpool Waters area, and particularly with the Everton Stadium at Bramley Moor, this heightened the UNESCO around what we're doing. I think first and foremost, the city clearly does not want to lose that status. It will do anything it can to fundamentally stop that. We now know that the recommendation is that we should be delisted. We will fight that right up until the meeting in July in China, which will make the determinate decision. I think it's really interesting that Robert Jenrick from government has very much come out on Liverpool's side on this, in terms of saying that UNESCO should have a second look at this. And I think we'll be looking for a deferral on that if possible. And really the call out really is for UNESCO to do this, not remotely, but come to the city and see what the city is doing. Because the one thing that I think about our World Heritage status is that it's a big site. Not a lot of people know that it exists right the way across the waterfront, right up into St George's Hall, right up into the town hall area. It's a big old site, and the city's done a huge amount of work in that site. It seems really unfair that they're picking on one area, which is probably the most derelict, uninviting and unwelcoming part of the city in Bramley Moor to basically be the determinant in this space. So I think at the moment we'll take the view that we're trying to hold on to it. We're not trying to look at the mitigation of that. And we hope that UNESCO will see that actually there's value in deferring this at least for another year. Come to the city, have a look at what we're doing, and I think that may change their views on life. But it's still to be played for, and we'll see how things pan out in China in July.
Great, thanks for that, Chris. And there's one thing for sure, that Liverpool, with the strength of its people, the businesses that we've heard from today, and the tourism sector in Liverpool is not going to suffer greatly because of any loss of World Heritage status. But let's leave that for another day. Thank you to all the panelists today, for all who have attended. We are hoping that we can go to a virtual event by the end of in our next one at the end of July. So hopefully keep watching.
Physical event. Physical event.
A physical event. A physical event. Actually, when we meet people in person is what we're looking to do. But perhaps it might be a hybrid event.
Well, we'll invite Peter. He can bring the cheese.
I was just going to think. I know where I want to book it, because I quite fancy some of that cheese, and especially if you've got any Basque wine.
We certainly do. A lovely rosé, Bill, as well. Very
nice. Well, I particularly like the chocolate, the sparkling Basque one.
Yeah, this is a chocolate rosé.
Oh, very nice. I will be round for a bottle later. Great to see you all. Please do keep watching, keep strong, and let's keep fighting for this great city. See you all soon. Thanks. Bye now.